Hello and welcome to a new series. Yes, another new series. Studio Ghibli Impressions, we'll call it for now. I've got my Porco Rosso t-shirt on, which I'm now not fat enough to actually fit in, since I've lost a bit of weight over the past month or so. And I'm joined here by my very good friend Graham from Man v Film. How's it going, man?
Good. This has been a long time coming, but I guess we'll
Yeah,
touch on that briefly before we start. Yeah,
yeah, we'll get to the genesis of this. The series in general, I'd quite like to do this with other people, is to basically have someone watch a Studio Ghibli film for the first time. Because I love Studio Ghibli. I'm just like maybe too passionate about it, and I like talking about them. And I'm just really intrigued to hear what other people think when they see one of these films for the first time. But with Graham specifically, this was something that 2 years ago, I think, I was in work and I
yeah,
was thinking to myself about Studio Ghibli because that's how much of a nut I am. And I was thinking, what would be like a good like order in which to watch the films of Hayao Miyazaki, who is the one of the most prominent. I'd say he's the most prominent director of Studio Ghibli. 11 feature films. I thought, what would be like the best viewing order, just as like a kind of tailored thing. The way I went through his films was very scattered, but it was like an interesting journey. So I mentioned this to Graham, and I wrote down like a viewing order for him. Now it wasn't something I want him to like stick to and to absolutely go through with, but something to just think about where to place each film. And the first film that I had on the list is the one we're going to be talking about today, 2 years later. And I think maybe with me, I get a little bit too pushy, and that pushes Graham in the opposite direction. Um, but then,
possibly.
but then it's funny. I mentioned doing a video about it, and suddenly he watched it within like a week. So maybe if I suggest doing a series on Twin Peaks: The Return, he'll finally he'll finally watch that as well. But
We'll see.
we'll see. So the film we're going to talk about, Studio Ghibli Impressions, is not even a Studio Ghibli film, which is a great way to start. But it is the genesis of Studio Ghibli. It came out 2 years before the first Ghibli film, which was Castle in the Sky. But it was like the starting point. It was when Miyazaki made his first like original film. It was very successful, and from that, Studio Ghibli was formed with another incredible director, Isao Takahata, who's a good director for another time and another film. But Miyazaki, he's pretty much generally considered to be one of the greatest directors of animation. I would call him one of the greatest directors of film in general because I love all of his films, and he has such a varied and different, kind of filmography from film to film. But the reason I picked Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is the film we're talking about, is because for me it's his first original film, and it kind of encapsulates a lot of what he went on to do throughout the rest of his career, and like themes and things that he's interested in, scenes of flight, environmentalism, a strong female lead, like a lot of the things that he's concerned with. And so I just thought that would be like an interesting epic to kind of start out on, because some of his films aren't epics, they're very quaint, simple films, but this is a big film. It's kind of a broad, and I don't think it's his best film, but it's one of my favorites. And Graham has finally watched it, so I'm going to stop waffling now and finally get to what he has
Yes.
to say. And he's been teasing me with his letterboxed uh, loggings of this. And I say loggings plural. He's watched it twice now, which intrigues me even more. So I'm going
Yeah.
to assume he doesn't hate it. And but he he sent me the letterboxd logging without the rating. So Graham, the floor is over to you. What did you think of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind?
Well, first, but before we get into these kind of things, it's just I find a lot throughout like film fans and things that there's a lot of disparaging comments. If you say like I've never watched a Kurosawa movie or I've never watched a Miyazaki movie, a lot of people can just be shocked or in your face about it. You were kind of constructive about the way you laid it out in front of me, and going into something like this, it can be rather daunting when you have a filmmaker who's so renowned, and especially in a format that I'm not the most attuned to. Animated movies in general, I like a kind of sense of realism through most of the kind of things that I see, and I know nothing about these movies going into it other than just little tidbits. And Nausicaa, I just took your word for it. That you laid out a few, and I picked up the first two movies that you gave me.
Yeah,
And watching the movie, I was kind of drawn in straight away with the character of Nausicaa. I kind of loved that the opening of the exploration scene before we meet Lord Yuda, and just the kind of world that we see already, and you get a sort of grand scape of what you've got. of these OMs, of this futuristic world, of the things that have happened since the 1,000 years since humanity has pretty much almost been eradicated. You get the idea of this like wide open spaces. It doesn't feel like a small contained story. It feels grandiose and very large. And it touched on all these kind of things. I like the environmentalism, the group of people who have taken to this new age, but have done so in such a constructive way, building this community around about it, creating these new ideas and the tribes and people. And I really loved the start of this. I felt like you get an idea of the world, and I was really drawn in straight away. Nausicaa and the flying device that she's on, and her affinity for animals in the world round about her was something that I really liked. Now this leads me on to probably my favourite animated movie, which is The Red Turtle, and I've seen a lot of kind of parables between the main character in that and this one, whereas it's all about embracing the world that you're in and working with it rather than working against it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, which was it was really good to see. It was a nice thematic that I had with it. Now, there was one thought that I had while watching the movie that I don't know if it's been mentioned or not, but there was something that I felt it was very kin to a movie that came out the same year. And I felt almost like this was a somewhat adaptation of Dune. You know, because you've got these giant worm-like creatures, you've got a world that's hard to inhabit. You've got this young royalty who is left fatherless and kind of pushed out in the wilderness to deal with that. And I don't know if that's something that's been talked about before, but I kept seeing all these similarities between those two movies. Is that something that's quite out there, or?
I've never heard that comparison. I wouldn't be surprised if it has been made, but it's nothing I'd thought of. But yeah, certainly when you think about the film Dune coming out, it was that same year, wasn't it, 1984?
Yeah, I'm sure it was the same year. But I mean, the books were out prior to that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, the film itself is based on a manga which Miyazaki himself created 2 years previously, and he continued working on that for 12 years, I think. So the manga is like far outstrips the story of the movie, and is like this huge magnum opus, and is a very different story in a lot of ways. It covers everything in the movie, but then it doesn't quite end the same way, and then it just strips off into this sweeping, nihilistic epic that is really quite incredible. I've read it. It's like 1,000 plus pages. It's huge, and ends on a very different note. But I think I prefer the film just in the case of like, okay, I want to enjoy the Nausicaa story. What do I do? 2 hour movie or spend 2 days reading the manga? You know, I've only read it once, but yeah. So it was like really like a huge pet project of his, I guess, and it just evolved as the years went on. He'd work on a movie, work a bit more on the thing, and it would be released not monthly, but it would be released in a magazine, I think. I forget the name of it now, but yeah, so there's two different versions of it, but the movie, I think, does such a great job of just packing that big epic into 2 hours and just giving you like a definitive, you know, it's like a distillation of what the manga does so great.
Like I really loved the start of it. Just seeing Nausicaa herself as she was sort of going around this world and just kind of enjoying things. Like when she discovers the sort of shell of the Om at the start, and she's cutting out the eyepiece, and then she's just sitting there as the spores are kind of falling down her.
Love that scene.
It doesn't, yeah, it doesn't feel like it's really trying to rush into the plot. You know, it's just it's easing you into this kind of world and the strange images that it has, which again reminded me a little bit of Fantastic Planet, the way it had this strange, unusual world building all around about it.
Yeah, I remember when I first watched Fantastic Planet, I felt like, oh, this is a bit like Miyazaki-esque. Like, not quite, but there's like, you can almost feel a little bit of the DNA in there. You feel like maybe he was inspired by it. And that really bugs me because I've got a book on Miyazaki and he talks about Fantastic Planet, but I can't remember what he thinks about it. So
Right.
knowing him, the way he's very blunt, he could have hated it for all I know, but he definitely talked about it in some interviews. So he's seen it.
There's a definite correlation between the way both of the filmmakers build their world out, you know, with the strange, unique animals and landscapes. But it doesn't feel odd within its setting. It feels right. It's unusual for us, the viewer, but it's very eye-catching when you're watching it. But I love that. And I love the characters that you meet in their initial town, whether it's her father or the old woman who has the prophecy about the character, which is a familiar trope in movies. You know, the savior that you see it in plenty of other things throughout history. But I never, even though it's familiar, where it's like the Matrix, you're going to be the one, you know, that I never expected. I kind of forgot about that. You know, the woman in blue or the character in blue that the prophecy mentions until the end of the movie, and I was like, oh, why did I not see that coming? Just, but I loved the particular aspect that I particularly loved before we get into the warring factions, I suppose, was the jungle and the Oms and the fact that it's so deadly and terrifying, but it's what's keeping humanity alive, even though they don't realize it. You know, when they got underneath the jungle, Nausicaa and a character later on, and they're seeing that it's something that is helping the planet. It's something that's keeping everybody alive. They shouldn't be fighting against that. And the reason that the animals are so defensive is because they are defending their landscape, defending the planet, and trying to help them, which is something that I really dig into.
Yeah, it's that big question of like humanity not being able to like empathize or not be able to see the forest for the trees and not realizing what they're kind of destroying or not, not letting the right thing help them in a way. And you can apply that to many, many different things, but it's certainly like a universal theme, I think, that fits quite neatly into what the film presents in a big kind of fantasy setting. But I like that it's giant insects, so that it's not. I mean, you have the God Warrior, which is that's high fantasy. But I like that the insect. It's almost, you could almost imagine 1,000 years from now the insect had somehow kind of mutated into these huge things and starting to overtake the world. So it's almost within the realms of. Oh, I guess you got her glider. So but I don't know. I like that about it, the jungle aspect, and it feels a bit more because it's not alien creatures. It feels like something you could possibly imagine. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, but even the glider doesn't feel like high tech.
No, it's very simplistic. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see the world that they've got, where it's all like windmills, and they're all kind of. It feels like old world, the way they're just working the land. It's nice. It has that kind of commonality between these people with these enormous flying ships that come into it later on, and this thing kind of like humble life that these people have. It feels like the people in the Valley of the Wind have started to work with nature. They're starting to go back to the way things used to be. They're working the land, they're working with it. And as a byproduct, they have been saved from this forest, which has been encroaching almost everywhere else. It's not until the warring factions come into it that they start to poison the well almost.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How did you find the different factions? Because the first time I watched this film, I loved it, but I was a little bit like confused as to, okay, who's that again, and what's that group, and so on. It took me a few viewings of the film to fully kind of lock in all the geography and the different, how did you?
Yeah, because the two factions. Is it Tulmikians and the Pagites?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So we've got them. The Tulmikians kind of are the inciting incident because they crash land with this embryo, would you say, of destruction?
Yeah.
And almost instantaneously, they feel very army-like. They're regimented. They are a war machine. They're looking to incite more war. The Pagite people, you don't really see too much of to start off with. You just basically meet one character who has been wronged. And then even when you get to the rest of their people, they're very similar to Tomikians. They're both they're warmongers pretty much. They're looking for a reason to fight each other. And that kind of leads on to the whole embryo thing was something that I felt was a kind of strange, fantastical element of the movie. These creatures, almost like Attack on Titan, it felt when it does the flashback to these giant monsters destroying everything. That felt very weird because when they're talking about the planet being wiped out, I took it as almost like legend that wasn't true. These giant things, it was just basic. There could have been some destructive force.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Over the years. And at the end, it was a little bit strange because I always thought that was going to be something else that was in that. But the two factions they're kind of well represented. You know who they are. The Tomikian seems to have the better army, but the Pagite people as well are just as violent as these other people. And you see it when they get the baby at the end. They're actually using that to like attack people as well. They're
Yeah.
just they're very destructive, and it's almost self-destructive, the nature of what they're bringing onto themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was really the only thing when I first watched it that not confused me a little bit, but I mean, when you get to like the Pejite, the city that's been like destroyed, and you just
Yeah.
see like this, just wasteland almost. And at first I
Mm-hmm.
remember thinking, wait, where is this again? I guess. Oh, I'm assuming you watched the Japanese version, right?
I watched both.
You watched both. Okay, what do you think of the English dub?
I liked it. I
It's
did
good,
like
isn't
the
it?
English.
It's one of the
Yeah,
better ones. I quite enjoy it. I really like the cast, and it's pretty good.
I really like Patrick Stewart as Gandalf the
Oh
Grey. I
yeah,
thought he was wonderful when he kind of turns up and
perfect
just
casting.
fitted that. Yeah, perfect, absolutely perfect. And it's a voice that you just instantly recognise and kind
Yeah.
of sit up and pay attention to. It happens, but I thought the voice acting was wonderful, and fitted the story perfectly. In fact, I don't have a preference.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's almost always the Japanese version exclusively. But when I was first watching these films and buying the Blu-rays, obviously they had the English versions, and if I wanted to show my brother them, then I would put the English one on because he was a bit too young to read subtitles. So I've seen like that one, Castle in the Sky, Spirited Away, quite a few of them in English.
Mhm.
But Nausicaa's the one I really like that the English dub of for some reason. It's just it's really good. As you were saying about the opening scene, actually, the parallel that I noticed when I went to see Star Wars: The Force Awakens was the opening scene with Rey. Felt
Yeah.
very similar to Nausicaa, even down to like the face mask and just scavenging for stuff. This quiet moment, you get to see this character is building up this character kind of. But I love that opening scene with the spores falling down and the music. What do you think of the soundtrack?
I see. I'm not the biggest soundtrack guy. I don't really notice them too much, but I found it kind of lead me down the path of the story a little bit. I did like it, but I felt it wasn't. It was subtle and not really in your face too much. Didn't take me away from the story.
I just love the sweeping theme at the beginning. It's like proper like operatic, and then when she's getting chased or she's chasing the Ohm at the beginning, this is a really funky kind of almost out of place like piece that sounds like a boss battle from a Sega game or something. That's the only bit that kind of sticks out to me. But I love
Yeah.
the score, and it's the same composer for most of Miyazaki's movies, I think. Yeah, not his
The,
first film, but I think from this film onwards, pretty much, it's the same composer, Joe Hisaishi.
yeah. There's some clunky pieces in the movie. I would say like sort of dialogue wise, but it never feels tropey or over the top. I'm thinking specifically of the part of Lord Yuda is being attacked at the start, and Nausicaa has to come and save it, and he's like thinking out. He's like, "Oh my god, she's stunned the Om and calmed the beast" type of thing, and
Mm.
it feels just a little bit almost clunky, but at the same time, it's fitting with the kind of character. And I really like the Lord Yuda character, especially later on when he starts to use his weapons, and you kind of see that this guy's capable,
Yeah,
more
when
than
he
capable.
when he kicks ass on the ship at the end is pretty cool. So
Yeah.
like the whole film's been building up to that. To see, he's another character who gets really like fleshed out more in the manga, obviously, with more time and more story to tell. Nausicaa is such a great character, so I'm glad that you kind of gravitated towards her. What I like is that she could be a very one dimensional character, and in some ways maybe she is at times where she's just super positive, caring, mothering, just always does the right thing for the most part.
Yeah.
But like I don't love the scene, but I like that when her father gets killed, she just loses her shit and just
Yeah.
starts stabbing people. And Lord Yuva has to like, I think he blocks her with his arm, doesn't he? And like her blade
He
goes
gets
in,
stabbed. Yeah, he
yeah,
goes
he
in.
just. So she has that rage within her that clearly is inside, and so there's little chinks in the armor along the way. But she is such a great character to watch because she is so for the most part pure and always trying to do the right thing, and it's kind of like a counter to pretty much most of humanity,
Everybody.
who is just I guess the whole thing is just looking at the way people can look at things and that are different and just say we need to destroy that, or like that's whereas she's like, well, let's like talk to it, let's try and understand it a little bit, and I think that's really beautifully summed up in that moment at the beginning where the fox squirrel comes on her arm,
Mm-hmm.
and she's just like, it's okay, nothing to be afraid of, and it just bites her, and she's like winces a little bit, and she's like, no, there's nothing to be afraid of, and it just kind of like stops, and then
Yeah.
just starts licking the wound as it realizes there's no threat. That kind of just sums up the whole conflict of the movie to me. Really, is that like that's the basis of the issue, and that's how she's trying to fight it, is by, you know, not fighting
Mm-hmm.
basically. So I really loved that. Right at the beginning of the film, it's just a really great mini moment that Miyazaki is so good at putting into films that just
Yeah.
tell so much with small details.
You get the flashback as well when she's a child and she has is it the baby om, or a small kind of insect creature,
It is a
and
baby home, yeah.
and she's quite affectionate towards it until it's kind of snatched away from her. You also get that counterpart of, oh, is it Asbel, the female
Asbel, yeah.
warrior? Yeah.
Oh
Um,
no, that's the boy.
the boy,
The
what's the
the
girl's name?
female is Kushana.
Kushana, right? Who feels, I kind of counterpoint to Nausicaa because she's obviously grew up as royalty in her
Yeah,
world, but she's become a more violent. She's antagonistic towards almost everything round about her. And there's a scene later on that stuck with me where she kind of takes her glove off her hand, and she's got a stump, and she's just talking about the ravages of war, and she just makes a comment like, the man that's lucky enough to marry me will see much worse, like,
yeah,
which was just a horrifying line, but it was one that just kind of clicked as like that's truly barbaric, like that kind of idea. But
she's a great character, I think,
mm,
and my view of that, again, not to harp on about it, is greatly colored by the manga, where she has such a great. That's probably like my favorite part of the manga is her storyline. It just
mm,
really expands on that character because she could very easily be a villain. In some ways she is, but in some ways she isn't as well. And so, bad things happen, and that's the thing that Miyazaki does a lot of, is there isn't usually like a clear cut villain. In a few of his films there are, but there's usually that ambiguity to it, shades of grey, and it just feels a bit more realistic and
mm,
complex, which just makes it
yeah,
a better story, I think.
yeah, and I really did like the sacrifice at the end when you've got the rampaging Oms, and Nausicaa tries to like save someone and ends up kind of, well, she ends up dead, I would say, from it. And you have the almost Oms giving a rebirth, realizing it, and her coming forth and kind of trying to show the humans that these things are pro-life almost. That they don't want to destroy everybody. They're trying to fix. That was a really nice kind of finale to it, and you get that scene before it with I don't know what they were called, but the giants that's birthed from that embryo, which is just it's almost a visual representation of the idea of man during war. They're just horrific, destructive. There's nothing nice or appealing about it, and it's
Yep.
just it literally withers away, destroying other things in front of your eyes.
Yeah, the kind of the burst that the God Warrior gives off, and it just like it looks like an atom bomb going off almost to me. That's
Yeah.
kind of what the imagery evokes to me. And I'm not saying it's a direct comment on atomic war or anything, but like just that this abhorrent, man-made, unnatural kind of creation of destruction, and how it's
And it
just
destroys itself
and it destroys
by doing it.
itself. Yeah, just melting away. It's a horrific scene, and just
Hmm.
it's awe-inspiring in the wrong kind of way.
Yeah, yeah, but it's a great metaphor right there in front of you.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. But for the most part, I would say that I really enjoyed Nausicaa. I definitely enjoyed the first half more. When the Talmekians come into it and it becomes a little bit more barbaric with their nature, the oppression of the people of the Valley of the Wind, and the warring faction as they fight over something, it became a little bit overbearing, and I wanted more Nausicaa. I wanted to follow her story even more.
Sure.
Every time we went back to these other people, I understand it's there for a reason. We need it there to see how barbaric and terrible they are, but I wanted more of that main character. I really enjoyed everything that she did, from just throwing herself into fights where it's against the odds. That when that Talmekian ship first comes, and her first thought is to try and save as many people as she possibly can.
Yeah.
and it's putting herself in danger. She just goes headstrong into that. It was such a wonderful character, and it never felt trite or saccharine or over the top. It just felt like that was her. She was just instinctually good, which you don't get many characters that are like that, which it works.
Yeah, and you don't get many characters who are like that, who don't feel the way the things that you're saying, like that could be, a little bit overbearing perhaps, or just maybe even unlikable, if it's too far. He just seems to
Yeah.
toe the line really well with her character. He's one of Miyazaki's great female characters, I think, and
Mhm.
it pretty much kicks off his penchant for focusing on a strong female lead. Yeah, I actually find it quite moving at times as well, which, around the time I started watching these films, I didn't really get that much from animation, to be honest. And so I was like, wow, this is different. This is like a proper, like, I don't want to say like a proper film, but, it's a bit
Yeah.
more, than your usual Disney fare. Although there are many great Disney films, don't get me wrong. But it's the stuff that I grew up with, just almost feels like child's play in comparison to a film like this.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's just so many great moments that I love. I really like the scene when her and Asbel go down underneath. I think they sink through sand, don't they? And then they end
Yes.
up in this kind of
Mhm.
cavern, and it's breathable air, and it's kind of showing you the purification that the Sea of Decay or the Toxic Jungle, which, depending on which version of the film you watch, is creating. And
Yeah.
just that setting was sort of just visually, and visually again, I
Mhm.
think the film looks stunning.
Yeah, there's a stark image that I quite like, and it's quite kind of awe-inspiring. It's the one you've mentioned when they go to Pegite and they're kind of looking at the destruction that's happened, and they've got the dead Oms there, and this kind of it's almost like a kind of what sandstone structure buildings, or it's painted that way. It's rather bleak, and just the sheer size of that town is massive, and to see these trail of destructions that's through it, and they're just looking down from like a high vantage point, and it's just you just kind of like, wow, a lot of people have died, a lot of destruction here, a lot of people displayed. It looks a little bit like a war zone, when you see news images of places that have been destroyed. It has
Yeah,
that kind of aesthetic to it.
that's true. Yeah, the opening scene, because this is one of the films I usually put on when I go to sleep, because I
Right.
just really like listening to it, and so the opening scene is kind of burned into my brain, like, at least through the audio. But I just love the slow opening of Lord Yupa going into that kind of town, and very quiet, and it sets up this world, like, and of this the spores, the decay, this kind of civilization or this settlement that has long since been, not destroyed, but been left in neglect, and no one's there
Yeah.
anymore. And then he's like, oh, yet another village is dead. And it's just a flash cut to these flying insects and the sound. And it just, like, it really just throws it in your face, like, this is where we're going. Like, kind
Mhm.
of that kind of apocalyptic kind of feel to it.
Yeah. I like when he arrives in the Valley of the Wind, and it felt a bit like Gandalf arriving in the Shire almost.
A
The way
little bit, yeah.
everybody, just all swarm him. They're all happy to see this guy that just travels the world doing whatever.
Yeah. So you watched it, and then you watched it for a second time. So what spurred you to watch it for a second time? What was the...
I wanted to see if it did feel very June-ish, and I wanted to see how it kind of foreshadowed a lot of things, because
Mm,
like it is a lot going on. Like I said, the first half hour or so kind of it's sedating you almost. It's just nice images, it's placid characters, there's nothing really going on, and then boom, this ship hits the Valley of the Wind, and then you're flooded with all these Talmukian characters. You've got all these Pagite characters. You're flying off in different directions in this world, and it felt like a lot happening, and I wanted to kind of pay attention to it to get the story. And then once you have the story kind of nailed down, you want to sit there the second time and catch the little things that you missed, see the art direction, see some of the nice designs they have. And that was really just what I wanted to do the second time round, because I felt as if I was concentrating too much on, okay, that's that person, they're going there, that's doing that I wasn't taking in the beauty of the animation, which there is quite stunning, and just the feeling and thematics of the film.
yeah, I'd say the same. When I first watched it, that was another thing that I think I appreciated more as I watched it a few more times. Um, how did you feel about the ending of the film? I believe when the film came out at the time, there was some criticism that it was a bit too, like, neat and kind of, typical. everything gets wrapped up in a neat little bow, and But how do you feel that serviced the story that you'd seen for the previous 2 hours?
I like that. Like this looks as if it's been a hard 1,000 years that the planet's had.
Yeah,
And it's like they feel as if they were on the crux of more of the same, more self-destruction, and it's taking this person to kind of just shake everybody and with their own sacrifice, kind of bring everybody together. And I think sometimes you want that. Sometimes you want the ending that leaves everything upbeat. And I don't know if I want to go back and see further stories. I feel as if it's a contained story that's there. I don't want any kind of cliffhangers that makes me feel as if I'm missing out. And you said this is a massive manga, but I feel as if this story is fully contained and I haven't missed out on anything.
yeah,
Maybe some backstory of characters, but it's a nice little wrapped up in a bow almost, and that's not a bad thing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm the same. Obviously, when I was reading the manga, I was like, oh, there's still like 800 pages left. Where could we possibly be going from here? And in a way, I almost think like, wow, what if he'd made this like his life's work and done like a trilogy or 2 trilogies could probably fit all the story, but then you wouldn't have had the wonderfully varied filmography he's had since then. So I love the way that it's worked out, in which you have the 2 separate versions, and the film one I think just does such a great job of telling that story.
Mm-hmm.
The end, I love the ending credits where it kind of gives you like almost an epilogue. You're just seeing the images, and that's something he does in quite a few of his films. And the final image I love. Like whenever I watch the film, I'm always looking forward to that final shot of her like mask. I'm assuming it's in that cavern where they fell down and realized it was purifying itself, and just like a little thing growing, and then the music just swells and then it ends. Like such a great, like, I don't know, it just leaves you on such a high whenever I watch a film anyway.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I really enjoyed it. It was a good start. I don't know if this is typical of Miyazaki, if there's going to be more movies like this, or if there's going to be if it's going to take a wild step away from it. What would you say I'm going to get next?
There is another film that is not very similar, but has it's like an epic. There's definitely deals with environmentalism again, but it's and fantasy elements, and I think it's his best film, just Princess Mononoke.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I mean, if I don't know, would you be up for doing another one of these and kind of
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I've got the next movie. Can you remember what that was on your
That's
list?
what. Well, yeah, I think I have my own ridiculous version of it right here.
Yes, that is exactly the one.
Yeah.
Kiki's Delivery Service. And again, I know nothing, and I'm not going to. I quite. A lot of people out there like to know what they're getting into. I like the complete opposite. Of going into this. I've seen the picture of the girl on what looks like a broomstick,
Mm-hmm.
and that is all I know. So what would you say? Is the dub good? Is the original better?
I'd go original on this one. I'd really go with the original. The dub is good, but there is a cat character in the film who speaks, and is really an integral part of the story. And in the English dub, it's voiced by Phil Hartman. I don't know if you know Phil Hartman from The Simpsons, Troy McClure, and I don't, not to boil down his career to just that, but
Yeah. You may remember him for so much movies, yeah.
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 He's great, but he just, for me, just doesn't suit the voice of the cat whatsoever, because you hear this like middle-aged man as this kind of companion to this young girl. Not that I'm saying that it's weird in that way, it just doesn't seem to fit. The Japanese voice is very like high, and it feels suited to a cat, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But in all fairness as well, Phil Hartman was Phil Hartman. He never like got lost in other roles. He had that vocal twang and was just
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just Phil Hartman.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Phil Hartman.
So,
It's pretty much
so
that.
why did you choose this one next?
Yeah, so again, Nausicaa for me, I thought would be a good starting point for people watching Miyazaki's films, because it gives you a bit of a crash course in the stuff that he's interested in telling in stories. His visual style, the music, again, he uses the same composer all the time. It's just a nice beginning point. From there, and I kind of structured the list. I don't know if we'll go through the list. We probably won't, because it's, it just is what it is. But the way I was thinking about it was, to take the viewer up and then down a little bit, not get to all the best ones straight away, to leave some of the real great ones for the end, but also to just go into different, have a variety along the way. So Kiki second, I would say, is one of his best films. So it's really showing you what he does best, and it's a complete departure from Nausicaa. Complete departure. Like, it's just almost couldn't be any more different, I would say. Different kind of story, different kind of setting, but no less great, I would say. So yeah, if you're up for doing that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Kiki, and we can continue.
Yeah, perfect. I can't wait to delve into it. I'll do it pretty soon, actually.
And that would be an actual Studio Ghibli film as opposed to Nausicaa, which kind of was like almost like what's the word? I guess they must have bought the rights to it, Ghibli, because it's in the Ghibli collections and stuff. I mean, it's kind of become assimilated into the Ghibli canon, I think, because it's kind of like the beginning point. So any final thoughts on Nausicaa before we end?
No, it's something that I would go back to definitely again. I watched it the second time with the dub with two of my kids, and they were just kind of into it as well. You know, they kind of loved the fantastical nature of it.
They enjoyed it, yeah?
Yeah.
That's
You
yeah.
know, my kids are more advanced than me. I caught one of them before watching Porco Rosso, because they've got Netflix, so they just watched whatever.
Right, yeah. It's interesting because I showed my brother a few films, and the two I had were Nausicaa and Castle in the Sky. Now, Nausicaa, I would say kids can watch and enjoy, but I wouldn't say it's a kid's film, if that makes sense. Castle in the Sky to me feels like a kid's film. It's like such an adventure and everything. Like, it's just so like, it feels like a perfect kids movie. So we watched both of them, and he just was kind of bored by Castle in the Sky. He loved Nausicaa, and I was really surprised by that because it just felt like Nausicaa was a bit more complex, but I guess something about it struck him more than the other one.
Yeah, but it's funny because my kids actually really enjoyed Fantastic Planet as well. So
Oh, really? That's intriguing.
yeah,
I wouldn't see that as a film that kids would immediately gravitate towards either.
hooked. All three of them,
Yeah.
and I've got, well, at the time it was ranging from like age 3 to 10, and they all watched Fantastic Planet and just loved it.
Oh, nice. That's almost gives you hope for the next generation of movie watchers.
It does.
You're doing a good job. All right then, so that's it for Studio Ghibli Impressions, Nausicaa. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and hopefully we can reconvene and talk about Kiki's delivery service, and I'd be very intrigued to hear your thoughts. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you all with the next one.